Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Built to Grow. And today's guest is Skyler Stuckey. And we're continuing some AI series discussions because, I'm in this journey as much as many of our clients are, not just for Brady CFO and our business, how we can serve business owners, but really, the journey of how can a food and ag business really harness AI. And I'm not talking about, hey, you got your, 25-year-old sales guy or account manager over there that's using ChatGPT or Claude to write their emails for them, to the buyers or whatever the case is. I'm talking about enterprise level AI. That how does a food and ag business really deploy AI at scale and get ROI at scale, that they can be more competitive, they can be differentiated, they can get real ROI out of it. And today's guest is Skyler Stuckey. Skyler is the Chief Innovation Officer at Gray Reed, a Texas-based law firm. Skyler's actually an attorney by trade. And so really a lot of this discussion today, I'm actually appreciative of, because it's questions even I have around what are the legal aspects of using AI? How does a business protect itself? And how can they really harness AI in a big way? Because that's literally what Skyler's trying to do for his business, is how do you utilize AI at an enterprise level and really, really get a lot out of it. So super excited to have you on the podcast today, Skyler. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Mason. Glad to be here, man. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Dive in for us. That, I gave that little intro, but there's probably so much more there to the picture and the story about you, the firm, your role, why the role exists, what you're focused on the role. Dive in for us.
Sure. Like you mentioned, I'm practicing lawyer by trade. I've been a lawyer for about 15 years now. I worked in Dallas Fort Worth all 15 of those years. And by specific trade, I'm a business and commercial litigation attorney. So I'm a business dispute focused attorney, courtroom attorney. So doing the litigation side of things. I initially worked at a boutique firm here in the Dallas Fort Worth area, about 20 lawyers. Then got big dreams. I went to a 1,000 lawyer firm with 40 offices, headquarters up in New York. They never knew who I was. I was just, a cog in the wheel down here in Dallas. And then found what I call like my Goldilocks, not too big, not too small firm here at Gray Reed and McGraw. We're about a 40-year-old firm, Texas based, have only been in Texas our whole lives. Initially big law guys that got tired of the big law game and started their own operation in Houston, that then spread to Dallas. And right now we're about 160 lawyers. We have a small office in Waco as well. And we are a full service firm based here in Texas. We do literally everything except immigration and like traditional criminal law. We do white collar and some other like criminal adjacent stuff, but everything else we do. So they run the gamut from bankruptcy to healthcare to labor and employment, banking, M&A, and then litigation, which I do. So we have, I think, a total of 17 different practice groups. In across all of our offices. I've been here at Gray Reed for 11 years now, so kind of the old guard with as much as lawyers move around these days. And was just a lawyer. I say just a lawyer. Was a lawyer for the majority of that. We are a mid-sized business by head count, even though we're relatively big for being a Texas law firm. And like a lot of businesses, we were in that exploratory phase of AI, asking a lot of the same questions. You had like, what the heck do we do with this? How do we scale this? What does an enterprise mean? And like a lot of companies, we put together a committee to explore that. That committee was people that were volunteered or voluntold to, spend a chunk of their time doing this. But for the majority of the people on that committee, it was lawyers that were already working 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. So when are you supposed to learn this? And by the way, has anything ever moved this fast or changed this fast in our recent memories? For me, no. So this committee situation was really ill-equipped to handle what it was tasked with, honestly. And we would, get 15 of us together every 30 or 45 days. Hey, did everybody read the slides? Oh, no, I didn't. I had a case last week. I couldn't. I had a hearing on Tuesday. Has anybody done any research on? No, I couldn't. I was on vacation or I was whatever. Um, that was the truth for us for about a year. And I was working on a specific case where um, we have some really cool legal tools here at the time, but not everybody was using them. We weren't really using them to their full extent. And I kind of had one of those light bulb moments of, well, let me see if it can do this. And it did that. And I was like, well, then it can't possibly do this. And then it did that. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, and I had that moment of like, I need to go tell everybody. Uh, and that was sort of the sea change moment for me to realize this is way too important for us to get wrong as a business. And I'm not saying it's going to replace us all or automate everything or make like it's still a bullet, but it's just too important to get wrong. So I actually enrolled in a course at Stanford Law, and after hours, like my girlfriend went to bed, I would spend 2 or 3 hours in the home office learning, and did that for a couple months. And then I developed some internal training programs that were practice group specific for us that were really focused not just on here's what AI can do, but like here's how to use AI as a bankruptcy lawyer. And by the way, AI is not just this one product, it's three products in our tech stack, and here's how they work together. So it was very different than like a vendor coming in and talking to us. It was me like meeting our lawyers where they live because there was one. Um, that then, of course, led to me going to the board and saying, this is what one person focused on this can do. Let me do this. Like I think I need to be in the chair on a daily basis doing this. But I think it's important that I maintain my credibility as a lawyer here at the firm. So why don't we develop a hybrid role where I sort of straddle that? Also, we're not having to bring in somebody from the outside who doesn't know our culture. We're not having to bring in somebody who doesn't know all the picadillos and idiosyncrasies of a bunch of lawyers, because guess what? A bunch of lawyers, a bunch of weirdos that have their own, taste and choice, and are going to be horrible at listening to somebody who's not a lawyer telling them how to practice law. And so it really match the use case that we needed for this position, even though this position didn't exist. And kudos to our board; they were brave enough. But also, I think because I'd been here for a decade, I developed some trust that I wouldn't be out there suggesting this if I didn't think it was the right move for us as a business. And also, I'm, giving up a piece of my legal practice to do this for the benefit of the firm. That I think sort of spoke to how much I trusted that this was the right thing, and they returned that trust and let me sort of step into this. That was about 4.5 months ago, and it's been about a million miles a minute since then. Um, a year ago, I never dreamed I'd be a podcast guest talking about AI, right? But yeah, that it's now become sort of the centerpiece of what I do here at the firm.
We got to know each other a little bit, and I'm aware that you have a theater background as well, that you were a theater major in college, and I think what's really interesting about this, Skylar, is I mean, just talking with you, like, you're passionate about this subject, and that is really important as you're trying. I mean, AI is change, implementing AI is change management, and change management is not just technical systems and processes and forcing it down people's throat, right? Like it's getting buy-in, it's working with, people that could be laggards in adoption or fearful of it, right? Like there's a lot of people that I know, like in the accounting field, there are a lot of people that are really afraid right now. And I'm sure that, some lawyers are probably afraid. I'm sure paralegals are most afraid, or, legal secretaries, et cetera, that they are absolutely scared to death. And so, how do you view this as your friend? But what's really interesting is even, our previous guest in this series, he was a technologist. And I asked him, I said, who should be the one internally championing things for an organization? And he said, oftentimes the really tech heavy person, which might be counterintuitive to a lot of food and ag business owners. Like if they want to make progress, they're probably looking for that highly, like, the person that's behind, the doors and getting all things done. And it's like, yeah, that may not actually be, what really is necessary. And I think your exposure to the systems inside your business, and that's the thing I want to kind of scope this a little bit, that it's not just legal. Like the reality is you're this accountable role for a business now, right? And a mid-sized business. We serve lower mid-market businesses and mid-market businesses. That's what you are, right? And so, the relevancy of this, but I'm interested to see, like, what's your take on the fact that, your background, your skill sets really aren't tech heavy. Like, is that a limiting factor for you in this role, and how effective you're being in this role, or what does that look like?
I that limiting factor is why I had to spend 3 months at 2 a.m. On like, and so you do have to have some um, level of understanding of these systems, right? Because otherwise, you don't know if what you're asking your IT team to do is reasonable or not, right? if you don't understand at least the lexicon and the terminology and the functionality of these things, it's hard to have that conversation with the tech guy because he's the one that's going to throw the switch at the end of the day, right? Or she's the one who's going to run the admin settings in the background, or whatever the case may be. Um, I will say the human side of this, the change management side of this, is where so many companies fail at this piece. And I think you're really insightful to have nailed that down. Well, I gave a presentation recently at a relatively important room full of potential clients, and it was really about change management. It was about AI, but it was really about change management and where this project, this change piece can be so frustrating for a company. You go out and spend a bunch of money to bring some tool in, and then it sits on the shelf, or you got 4 people that use it and 80 people that don't. Um, that is on one side of the equation. The other side is the absolute forced adoption, regardless of human opinion, thought, fear, otherwise. Neither one of those are going to work, right? So how do you thread this needle? I think you do it by not making it a needle. Like it's not that hard to thread if you're meeting people where they are on this. I personally went and when I took this role, my second meeting after meeting with our practice group leaders was with all the paralegals. Just the paralegals. We got in a room and closed the door and said, "I know everyone in this room is terrified. Let me tell you why you don't need to be, and let me tell you why the best thing you can do is let me help you become better at this and work with this because you're part of this team, and we're not talking about ripping apart the team. We're talking about making the team better." That conversation, it's probably the most important thing I've done in this role since I took the job was pay attention to the human thing that was happening within my company and address it versus adopting technology for technology's sake or shoving modernity down everybody's throat for modernity's sake. But to say, this is ultimately about servicing a human operation, which is our law firm, or it's your ag business, or it's your food company. And yes, it may be super exciting for operations team A that's going to use this for school stuff, but maybe it's terrifying for operation team B that might see their entire workflow being replaced. So, how do you handle that? You need somebody with the EQ, human skills, sort of to have those talks because there are, and it, most people on our team are not tech people. So they have a hard time relating, conversing, and connecting and because they don't speak the same language about stuff, right? And I don't mean that as a knock on our tech guys. I mean that as a honest analysis of who we are as a team, right? And so it's my job to bridge that gap constantly. I have to be able to talk to the tech team about tech, but I don't have to know everything about tech. I have to be able to talk to my paralegals about being paralegals, but I don't have to be a paralegal. I've got to be a human in both those that is connective tissue across our firm. And I have transitioned from being a siloed lawyer that's working on my singular book of business to how can I bring everybody up 10%? Because if I bring everybody up 10%, exponentially better than my one silo of business.
I'm interested, to kind of dive it into, part of what I want to go with this discussion. You highlighted a lot about, what makes you successful, particularly not necessarily as a technologist. And I think that's a major consideration for a lot of food and ag businesses is don't necessarily look at the techie that there is relevancy that, if you really want to deploy AI at scale inside your organization and to get full value out of it, and to get full adoption, you're going to need leaders, like actual people leaders, as a part of that process. It's so critical. And, it just, yeah, just because that it could make somebody in accounting's job easier, there's a whole lot of emotion tied up in that, right? And you have to meet that person where they're at. They could be incredibly scared and very risk averse and avoidant of adopting it. And that's not really what you want either. And so, that's the thing is that you can invest a bunch in all these different tools, et cetera, and go nowhere because you didn't do the right thing from the very beginning of staging it and setting it up. But I'm interested to understand, um, you are a chief innovation officer of a law firm. And At least what keeps me up at night is even in running our practice, like we're dealing with a lot of, like we get tax returns, we get all of the clients' internal financials, we get their audited, reviewed financials, et cetera. We are dealing with a lot of confidential data. And it gives me the heebie jeebies about what tool are we using? Is it legally protected, et cetera, that we want to use these tools and many food and ag business owners want to use them as well. I think that they're a little bit concerned as to what's the right use cases to where they're still legally protected. Especially ag businesses tend to be pretty low margin. A lot of things creep up. There's a lot of seasonality. They could have a terrible season. Like it's just very hard to predict. And the last thing that they want is a liability claim related to, I got, one of my team members over there misusing it. How can they go about protecting themselves?
One, I'm glad to hear you got the heebie-jeebies trying to protect client information. That means you're thinking the right way. It's the worst thing you can do is not pay attention and worry about this. But worry is not fun, right? So how do you address this? So AI adoption is important. AI governance is just as, if not more important. Because I can't tell you how many companies that are our clients come to us and say, "Well, we've been using AI for 6 months. We don't really have a policy in place." And it's like, what does that even mean? What does that even look like? Well, who's using it? Oh, we just have people with individual account, and like that is like lawyer heebie-jeebies, right? On this exact piece. So here at Gray Read, the rule we have in place, the policy we have in place, is that if AI is going to touch anything that is business related for the firm, it has to be an enterprise level account. For those listeners that may not be familiar with enterprise level accounts, it's the same thing that you'd have with like Microsoft with your Office suite or with QuickBooks or with your financial accounting. It's a company wide account rather than individual accounts. That allows you to do a couple of things. One, track analytics and know who's using things. That's important to know if you're actually getting ROI and stuff. But more importantly, it allows you from the top down to have admin enforced data protection and controls. You get to toggle off everything in one fell swoop for all your users. So, how do you ensure that data is being protected? Have a single source that toggles that off and on, right? Rather than 50 employees who promise you that they've all toggled off data retention. And the things that are really important for business owners to be aware of on data and liability, look at a couple things in any AI tool that you're looking for. Data retention is a big one. Does it retain your company's data? And if so, where is that data retained? Is it in a fully encrypted walled garden environment that nothing else is going to touch? Or is it on Amazon servers mixed in with a bunch of other stuff? What about model training? And what model are we talking about there? Most listeners are going to have heard of like Claude or Chat GPT or Gemini. Those are what we call models. They're foundation large language models. And that's like the engine that drives what we think of as AI now, like the very responsive, very chatty AI. Those by default take the information you put into them and train themselves to get better and better. And when I say by default, I mean if you went home and signed up for Chat GPT and didn't pay a dime and just had a Chat GPT account, by default, everything you type in it takes back to the model reads it, it trains, it gets smarter, it gets better. With enterprise accounts, that data never goes into the model never actually reads it. It does process it to give you output, it has to, but it doesn't go back and train and improve the model. And that training process, like actually ingest the data, that's how public companies have their data show up in responses from LLMs that shouldn't be in there. An enterprise account takes care of both of those issues for you. Now, I want to be clear, all of these tools, and not just LLMs and AI, including Microsoft Office and QuickBooks, they're cloud based, they're computer based. Hacks and breaches happen. So that danger is out there. None of this is, 110% data secure, but it is as secure and as confidential as business can be in 2026 when it's happening on a computer. Uh, and so, as a law firm, if we being irresponsible with client information, we're not going to be a law firm for much longer. So we had to approach this from a data protection standpoint first. Um, the other thing for, I think, especially food and ag people to think about, a lot of employment issues, a lot of HR issues. make sure that the LLMs you're using have disclosures about how they were trained. Some LLMs can exhibit bias towards protected classes or other groups within their model. It happens, unfortunately, because if it was trained on older data before there was some employment protections in place, it can carry that through. So you just want to be sure you're using, a reliable, I don't want to say authoritative, but credible model in what you're doing, and you're not, picking something off the shelf without vetting it a little bit first.
That's a really good point, and the reality of, I mean, again, data security, but, you know, you got employee data, and a lot of food and ag businesses are dealing with a lot of, like, wage and hour issues, right? And, wage and hour issues, whether they were properly paid for lunchtime or lunch breaks, et cetera, or could they take them, I should say, as they were supposed to, and, just management of that, but then the last thing you need is that, hey, their social security number got leaked because, of misuse in an AI tool as well. I like that perspective because I think that was a struggle in my mind, and I think I just try to break things down to simple concepts that, hey, like we do use ShareFile, internally as a tool that we receive, client information, we have them uploaded into ShareFile, into our ShareFile, and we maintain our documents in ShareFile, and we then move them to another secure data storage, tool. But all that said, it's like, okay, ShareFile can still get hacked, right? And so, okay, yeah, as long as you're using the enterprise, version of, some of these different tools, Claude, et cetera, Microsoft Copilot, like, yeah, there's still always going to be the risk that it gets hacked. Like, that's a relevant risk, but your systems could still get hacked. Microsoft could still get hacked. OneDrive, SharePoint, et cetera, could still get hacked. It's the question is, like you said, is the data being used on a model that all of a sudden is deployed out there? And I guess a quick question for you, like, does redacting really matter? Like if I were to use an Adobe PDF tool to start, redacting a bunch of, key data that names, et cetera, social security numbers, but I left relevant pieces of information that I could still stick in an AI model and use, like, does that really help much, or what's your legal opinion on that?
So it's an interesting question because you have the redaction issue, but you also have metadata that is baked into these PDFs and stuff like that. So unless you're scrubbing metadata as well, a lot of these tools are smart enough to pull things out from behind redaction, smart enough to find metadata that's tied into that. And so unless you are super tech savvy with what you're doing and dropping it in, there's always the danger that the metadata and the other stuff that's going to sit behind those redactions is still being ingested by the tool. The great thing about an enterprise level tool is that you don't have to worry about anonymization or redaction or anything because the data is never leaving sort of the walled garden of your piece. The other thing that I should have mentioned that I failed to about enterprise accounts is the liability piece got me. That's the only way you're going to have indemnification from an AI provider on like something like a data breach or a breakdown. So it does at least give you a little bit of a peace of mind that there isn't potentially, and not everyone's going to do that. Like you're not going to get Anthropic or Claude, but if you're buying a focus tool for like HR or something, they might bake indemnification into the process. So it does give you that because it's the whole company being hacked versus, just your personal Claude Pro account at home. Uh, but back to the redaction piece, it's it's better than doing nothing. I still wouldn't recommend it. Is what I would say as a lawyer. And I will say the difference in price too across scale, depending on the size of your company for enterprise versus non-enterprise, I don't think it's really that great, because you're also getting integration support and admin. Because when you really look at what you're getting, but look, if you're in a position where, hey, that's just not going to work for my company, we're going to have 5 Claude Pro accounts, and we're going to have our team use that. You can go in on those paid accounts and turn off data training, turn off data retention. Um, that would just be the thing that you need to vet on the front end before you sign up for any of these products, because some will provide more options on that than others. Um, and heck, take their user services agreement, drop it into Claude, and have Claude tell you what it means on stuff that you may, because they're going to use a bunch of legalese. But ask it targeted questions about what does this mean for data retention? What does this mean for model training? If you can find a tool that works for your use case and ensures zero model training and zero data retention, that's your safest and best use case for avoiding liability, avoiding data leakage, and all that kind of stuff. I would still recommend an enterprise over non, but I know that's not a reality for every user. And so making sure you have going back to like being tech savvy, maybe tech fluent, understanding model training and like so if you're using an AI tool at home and this is all sort of like sounding like Greek to you, sit down with the tool and ask it to explain to you model training. Literally, like, have it explain to you all that stuff and tell it, explain this to me, in a way that is not designed for a lawyer or text expert, but whatever you are, an ag business owner or a middle-aged lawyer or whatever. Um, and that's how I learned a bunch of stuff that I don't know with these tools.
I'm really interested to hear perspective from you, just given what you know and how you're deploying in your organization. Because food and ag businesses, again, uh, generally low margin. I mean, I've witnessed massive salad companies, like some of the bigger salad companies in the entire world that grow and pack all the lettuce that we eat, running on 1 to 2% net income margins, and that's normal. The amount of risk taken by the seasonality factors as well as food safety risks. I mean, I just farming and food and ag is a labor of love, 100%. All that said, there's just so many risks that ag operators are facing. The last thing that they need to, consider is, additional risk. But I'm really interested to understand perspective because to like Claude and all these other things like the enterprise accounts, it's not necessarily the cheapest thing. There's usage credits that you can run out of credits too. Um, do you really foresee that AI is really going to be helping companies replace jobs or improve margins? And that might be two different questions, but would love to kind of hear your take on it. That like, is it going to help make things so efficient that there's actually tangible margin improvement potentially for food and ag businesses by reducing some of their overhead or whatever the case is, that that their back office, like they can really amp things up? What's your take on that?
No, it's man, what a good question, and what a dangerous question. But no, it's funny. Lawyers, I'll just be candid with the room. Lawyers are terrified that we're getting replaced and that our law firms are going to look different because all this stuff going to be so good. Having been like knee deep in this for the last 6, 9, 10 months, and where I'm at, um, okay, we'll go, Kona side, real honest here. A lot of, I think, the doomerism and like it's going to replace all jobs. Those AI companies are trying to value build their products before they launch IPOs and do stuff. I don't think it's coming for everybody's job. Is it going to make us more efficient? Is it going to change some hiring decisions? Yeah, it for sure is. To your ultimate question, though, yeah, one of the things that we see as a law firm, it was hard to place an ROI number on some of like the forward deployment tools, like this lawyer is using this to draft or research, whatever. Where the quickest ROI return has been like back office stuff, like improving workflows for our marketing team, increasing the efficiency of our intake and billing teams. And it really has been an overhead shrink, and maybe that's the wrong. It's not that we fired anybody. It's that we used to get 30 bills out, a day. Now we're getting 70 bills out a day. And the sooner you get a bill out, you get it paid here at ours, and like that's a clear like money in our bank account faster, and money in our bank account faster. It makes us more liquid and functional in our other stuff. So it's efficiency gains that I think. And so when I hear about a company running on a 1 or 2% margin, I mean, and you're right. We have big ag clients. We have big. I worked on a massive case about GMO crops a couple of years ago that was very ag focused. And you're right, man. Those farmers, it was class action case. Thousands of farmers were our clients, and for them, taking a $50,000 hit is the difference in the farm staying functional or not for the year for some of those folks, which is wild. They're big operations. Um, if you can save $10,000 because you didn't get popped with a compliance issue because you really used AI to run a first, glance on all your compliance documents, great. we've now put a little bit more in the kitty. If we have better documentation for our HR and workforce admin that makes them quicker and faster and scales that process, and maybe you don't have to go hire the extra person because you've gotten better, cool. We've shaved a little bit off. And to go from a 2% margin to maybe a 4% margin or a 5% margin, it may not change the world, but you got a buffer now, and we can get through another year if there's a seasonality issue. So yeah, man, I really do think now that okay, the flip side of that is where do I find the bandwidth and the time and the budget to go get these things if I don't have a huge a war chest to spend on a AI innovation budget. Um, the thing I just mentioned, these tools can teach you about themselves and they can teach you about workflows and that doesn't cost a nickel. It just costs a little bit of extra sweat and your farm and ag folks are already working their tails off. So I know they're not afraid of hard work. But as intimidating as these things can be, sit down for a weekend and just start talking and typing and thinking with this and suddenly it becomes more functional and suddenly becomes less of a well that's a problem behind a knowledge wall and okay I see it now. um, we talk to clients all the time. They're trying to figure out how to do the same exact thing in their business. What I tell every client is you know your business better than I ever will. Sit down and think about what are my repetitive tasks that we do over and over and over and over here? That's use case number one. You can shave 20% off all those, I guarantee it, with the right tool. What are our biggest pain points? Where do we lose the most time and efficiency or have the most turnover or whatever that we're leaking money out the door with? Let's find those two use cases. And I think you mentioned earlier, Mason, like, okay, I don't have the time to go do this. Who are my champions going to be for this? Who are my, like adoption leaders going to be for this? Let me identify 3 or 4 people and give them a stake in this and make because it's going to improve their lives and their workflows. Um, Suddenly, this big scary dragon of AI becomes, a bite-sized monster that you can pass out and do. But yeah, especially for companies that are um, don't have huge margins. What if you can change that by 1% with an AI tool where you're not having to hire a single additional FTE, you're deploying a tool.
Even a quarter of a percent makes the world of a difference for an enterprise that is doing 100 million a year. A quarter of a percent is actually a really big deal. And if you can offset some cost or create some efficiencies that other people wouldn't have, it's the smallest fraction of a difference. That yeah, you're selling commodities, right? That you're selling things that have been sold for thousands of years. You got to find every little inch you can is the thing. That every little inch you can in terms of innovation, whether, new genetics in something or this or that, like every little inch that you can get, it does make you better and stronger. And if you can put more in your pocket, by all means. And so, yeah, it's also my take on it that, I don't necessarily know that it's going to replace jobs, but I just think it's going to change jobs so significantly. Like even today, that I'm sure you've experienced it, but like I just put together like 4 or 5 SOPs today that it would have taken me weeks, if not months, to do this in the past. I remember one of my first jobs when I just got done with college is I worked for an ag marketing company, specifically like a commodities marketing company, and they really needed standard operating procedures. And part of the job was going in and actually understanding the process and like documenting it, but then creating the written SOP that it could be trained going forward. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, I can just like do a video chat with somebody, talk about it, and put in AI and say, Claude, like develop the SOP for me now. And it's done in hours. Rather, that was literally I think I remember to produce like 5 or 6 very like enterprise level SOPs. It took me no less than 6 to 8 weeks, right? And so, I mean, it's just going to shift work in just a totally different way, and you're going to be focused in stronger and better areas. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful that it makes people a heck of a lot more efficient. That we are using our brains. I think it will be interesting, though. Nonetheless, I think there are people that thrive in worlds, right, Skyler, or the design of jobs where, especially like in our side, accounting and finance, like there are people that just like doing debits and credits. Like there are people that like literally like a job, a good day's work is posting all the transactions correctly and getting the bank statement reconciled. And if that's what, makes them happy and makes them go to bed every night and have, sleep well at night, yeah, AI is gonna be able to do a lot of that, right? And, okay, well, what do we give them that makes sense? That question is still a little bit open for me, but, I'm sure that we'll figure it out with time, so.
No, yeah, I agree. It is shifting workflows and shifting how we do stuff. I think it's gonna create new jobs that didn't exist before, and it's not always a one-to-one replacement. Like, if you were, a widget maker, you can't go become I don't have a good example, but, computer coder overnight. And so if we have these new jobs that didn't exist before, it's not gonna be a one replacement, and it is gonna change workflows. What I have told so many people in our organization and others, though, is you can stick your head in the sand and, keep your door closed and keep typing away, or you can get knowledgeable about this stuff and understand, where the winds are blowing. And I don't mean that in a stay up at night and worry about it until it happens, but I mean it in the um this is going to, like, as lawyers specifically, we are kind of a great little microcosm of, you can close your office door and keep drafting briefs and doing research and saying, they'll drag me out of here. Or you can say, okay, we have now AI native law firms. What does that even mean? Okay, now I understand that. How are they doing their workflows? What have they, triaged and changed about what they're doing? Should we adopt any of that? Can that change what we do here? Hey, our paralegals all used to do X, Y, and Z. What if we can automate X? They're happier, and maybe they have a small task that we're gonna replace X with, that we're still getting the same workflow out, we're still just as efficient, but now we have paralegals that can cover this new thing that they couldn't cover before. Guess what? We have broader coverage, similar efficiency, and the same output. But we couldn't do that if we didn't understand the tools and didn't understand the AI and didn't have a grip on what's reasonable, unreasonable, capable, uncapable. I mean, um, I'm looking at procuring a new AI tool for our firm to help out with our time entry and billing systems. And I had 3 or 4 conversations with partners like, no, no, no. Then I had to sit down. I was like, wait a minute. Do you guys think I'm talking about this? Because I'm really talking about this. And, like, it was a moment of like, oh, we didn't know that existed. We thought it was all, and I'm being vague on purpose here, but it was a moment of, guys, we have to have fluency in these conversations. We have to have understanding so that we can have a shared conversation about the future of our business where we're all speaking the same language, and, we're singing from the same hymnal or whatever your turn of phrase is. Um, that was one of the, I mean, this is an internal example from our firm, but we had, this is back, so we've had pretty advanced AI available here since like late 2024. We were not using it very well in 2024 and even part of 2025. And we had a conversation with our senior partners here at the firm, and we got a lot of like, I don't need to know how to use this stuff. I'm never going to use it. I don't need to know how to do, AI tools. And my response was, yeah, but you're still going to mentor younger attorneys and you're still going to assign them work and you're still going to need to review it and edit it. If you don't understand how they did it and you don't understand the tools they're using to create it, how are you going to know if what you're asking them to do is reasonable, if the edits you're making are functional, or how to speak to them about tackling the tasks to begin with? We don't have to be writing together, but we got to be using the same font, right? Like, and so um, we had to get our senior members on board with just institutional understanding. And if you just take that and break that down to you're a business leader, you're trying to make this case for whatever, or understand if your IT leader who wants to buy a tool is correct. You got to be engaged enough to be conversant and fluent in these things to make those decisions for your company going forward.
Skyler, thank you so much that you've dropped so much knowledge for us here, especially, just the biggest thing that I think a lot of people are thinking about is, again, just what's the legal risk and, how do we approach that and, the application and making sure that, hey, we use enterprise level tools and the consideration as to how it is going to affect work. I so appreciate your insight for our audience here, Skyler. So thank you so much for being on the show, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mason. Loved it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Until next time, y'all, that we're going to be continuing some additional episodes on AI and talking with AI experts and thought leaders. So until next time, y'all, see ya.
Take care.